The Olympics are coming, which usually isn't a big deal for football fans, or at least American football fans. And to be honest, if American football were in the Olympics, probably wouldn't be that exciting because something like 98% of NFL football players are from the United States? What if the Olympics, instead of being based on countries, were based on your alma maters? Wouldn't it be cool if you had Olympics where you had University of Alabama alums playing against University of Auburn alums? We're doing that today with Byron Cobalt's Alumni-Olympics football edition. That's right, I've picked the teams for every major college in the country. We've staged a tournament, and you're about to see the results. I'm going to reveal each team as they get eliminated from the Olympics. Here are the rules. For the players on these Olympic rosters, all the players must have played at least an NFL snap. So that means that players like Caleb Williams are not eligible. Eligible schools must have at least 25 active NFL players as of 2023. No bench spots are required for the team. You just have to fill out your starting lineup. And the tournament follows the Olympic men's soccer format, which means 16 teams make the Olympics, start with group play, and then follow with an 18 tournament, just like the actual college tournament should be. Some assumptions that I had to make in compiling this competition. First, I'm assuming that players fall off quite a bit when they hit the couch. Come on, some players do. So it's not really fair to assume that certain players are staying in shape. That'd be silly. No real consideration was given for the UFL. I'm just saying that outright. I just didn't really consider UFL that much. It's assumed that college teams will flex a little bit to fit the available players. Some of these teams are really struggling to fill out certain position groups, I'll tell you that much. The game is suddenly injury-proof, otherwise this tournament would never happen in the first place. And I'm going to also assume that players in general prefer to play for their most recent school, or any school that they will actually get playing time for. So we're going to start today with the teams that had 25 NFL players in 2023, thus were eligible to compete in the Olympics, however, did not make the tournament. So they got eliminated in a qualifier somewhere, starting with the University of Nebraska. Yeah, you can probably tell why they got eliminated. I had to go search through decades of data just to find a quarterback from Nebraska that actually played in the NFL. Scott Frost didn't even technically play quarterback in the NFL. He came in as a defensive back or something like that. I don't know who else would have been better. This is too bad, too, because there are some spots where Nebraska's team isn't terrible. You got Levante David on defense, Randy Gregory, you got Amir Abdullah, Wan'Dale Robinson would probably be getting the ball at an absurd degree. But, yeah, needless to say, Nebraska didn't make the Olympics. Arkansas missed the cut. Brandon Allen is their quarterback. Surprisingly weak running back crop for Arkansas. I had to pull Darren McFadden back to actually be the number 2 guy here. So you got Dre Greenlaw is a nice player to have on defense. Jason Peters is still fine enough. Frank Ragnow, but yeah, there was no way Arkansas was going to make it. UCLA, despite a strong linebacking core, good running backs, and a strong left tackle in Colton Miller, really just didn't have much of a team here. Like most of these guys, you probably don't know them. I mean, Kenny Clark is decent. That's actually kind of an aged linebacking group as their strength. But yeah, UCLA didn't make the cut. Miami, almost as ridiculous as having to pull Scott Frost out of whatever office building he's working in right now, was trying to grab Vinny Testaverde and put him on a uniform again. There's him or Ken Dorsey, or otherwise we're going to players that barely sniffed NFL rosters in the first place. Their strongest point probably is running back with Gus Edwards, but actually, again, similar to Arkansas, just a little bit too shallow. After Jalen Phillips and Greg Rousseau on defense, actually that's probably the strength of the team. Miami did not make the Olympics, although if we did this back in the year 2000, they probably would have been really good, especially 2004, 2008, they would have dominated. South Carolina, partially because Connor Shaw is their quarterback, they also did not make the Olympics. They would probably give the ball to Debo on almost every single play. And they have defense, a decent presence on the defensive line. Clowney, Ingram, and Javon Kinlaw, and also decent corners with Gilmore and J.C. Horn. Hayden Hurst in there, Rico Dowdle. Yeah, they're not much to say on the offensive line. South Carolina missed the Olympics. Auburn was surprisingly weak here. Garrett Stidham at quarterback, I mean, they had 2 NFL quarterbacks, but you can't play them really both at the same time. Very middling skill position players. Derek Brown on defense is good. Carlton Davis, Presley really just didn't have a shot here. Ole Miss. Yeah, I had to go to Eli Manning for quarterback. It's tough with Ole Miss in the fact that you have A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, and Elijah Moore as their receiving core, and them somehow not making the Olympics, and also Laramie Tunsil here. Not to mention solid tight ends for a college alumni slate. But Eli Manning's the quarterback. Maybe years ago, he retired now. Yeah, they weren't going to make it. Virginia Tech actually had also some strong points, but some really weak points. So they got Tyrod Taylor is fine at quarterback. Logan Thomas is fine. Khalil Herbert It's fine. Christian Darrisaw and Wyatt Teller offensive line is probably the strength of the team. Kendall Fuller, Chuck Clark, Terrell Edmonds, Tremaine Edmonds, some strong spots on defense too, but look at those receivers. Come on, they couldn't move the ball. Oklahoma State, actually a surprisingly solid team. Yeah, I consider Tyreek Hill to be eligible for Oklahoma State here. They're probably they're trying out 3 running backs here to even try to get some points on the board. Outside of Emmanuel Ogbah, not much to say on defense at all, because they probably gave up 50 points per game in the qualifiers. It did not make the tournament. TCU did not make it. Andy Dalton is a fine enough quarterback. Their running backs are just okay. Wide receivers are disappointing at the NFL level, at least. Outside of just a few spots here, again, just not enough of a complete team. Jason Verrett, fine at corner. There's not much here. And Jerry Hughes is kind of old, too. NC State. I didn't expect NC State to be one of the teams that had 25 players in the NFL in 2023. We got Jacoby Brissett, solid running backs and receivers. Joe Tooney on the offensive line, and Garrett Bradbury. Ike McQuan, it's a solid offensive line, too. Aleem McNeil and Bradley Chubb on the defensive line, but nothing on the back end. You know who some of these guys are. So NC State didn't make it. Russell Wilson obviously wanted to play for Wisconsin. Texas. I thought for sure Texas is going to make it, but that was wrong. I must have been thinking too much about, like Miami, 2004, 2008 time frame. Colt McCoy is a quarterback because, again, players that are in college are not eligible. So I can't pull Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning up. Running back, very strong. Bijan, Roshan Johnson, and Deontay Foreman. But that's pretty much it as far as strengths are concerned. Marquise Goodwin is still their best receiver. Samuel Cosme, Connor Williams, some solid offensive linemen. Surprisingly weak defensive line, and now Texas couldn't make the cut. The last team that clearly missed here was Tennessee. Joshua Dobbs, if I did this last year, I probably would have had Tennessee lower, but Joshua Dobbs has actually established himself as not bad. And plus, solid running backs here with Alvin Kamara and Ty Chandler. But you look across the rest of the roster, and there just isn't much here. Josh Palmer as the undisputed #1 receiver. Derek Barnett, Emmanuel Mosley. Now we're reaching here. Yeah, there's no way Tennessee was making it. There were 4 teams that were actually difficult to have missed the Olympics here that were really close, and presumably their fan bases were devastated when finding out they missed the cut. First, we have Washington. Yeah, that's right, Washington missed it. A bit of a lack of offensive firepower for how strong of a college Washington can be. So you have Jake Browning here, who's a good enough quarterback. Puka Nacua helps at receiver, but Dante Pettis is the #2. That's not great. Okay, tight ends. K. Dotton, Will Dissly, Drew Sample. That's okay. Not much going on the offensive line. Defensive backs, very solid, though. This is what they almost made the tournament with. Marcus Peters, Trent McDuffie, Budda Baker. It was tough to knock them for that. Shaq Thompson, they missed it, but not by much. Florida State would have been a fun one, especially a few years ago. Jameis Winston is their quarterback, obviously. Running back actually a lot weaker than it would have been 4 years ago with Dalvin Cook and Devontae Freeman, obviously a bit aged at this point, and Cam Akers being, Cam Akers. Their wide receivers were surprisingly weak. Yeah, that's right. I think Kelvin Benjamin is still their #2. Auden Tate's their #1. Who's Jameis Winston going to throw to here? Their defensive line is solid enough. Josh Sweat, Brian Burns, that's actually pretty good here. And Jermaine Johnson as another pass rusher. And amazing defensive backs for one college. Ronald Darby, Jalen Ramsey, Asante Samuel Jr., Derwin James. That's excellent, but they can't score any points, so they missed it. Stanford, despite the fact that Davis Mills is okay and they have Christian McCaffrey at running back, there's just not enough here. Their tight ends are much stronger than their receivers. Dalton Schultz and Zach Ertz and Austin Hooper. I would say all 3 of them are probably better options than Michael Wilson and Trenton Irwin. A decent offensive line, but not that much on defense. After Solomon Thomas, Blake Martinez here, Bobby Okereke, they're going to give up too many points. Stanford missed the cut, despite Christian McCaffrey. And the last one to miss it was Penn State. Penn State, I thought, was in it for a long time. Penn State, they got Will Levis and solid skill players. With Saquon, you got Miles Sanders you can pop in there. Wideouts, Chris Godwin. Allen Robinson for this tournament is fine enough. Jahan Dotson, same thing. Pat Freiermuth and Mike Gesicki at tight end. Looking at that, you'd think they'd be in. And defense, you got Michael Parsons. You would normally think they'd make it. And Joey Porter Jr. in the secondary, but they just weren't as good as some of the other teams that made it. Not a major weakness here for Penn State. They still didn't make the cut. Here we have it. 4 groups. We have Group A, Georgia, Mississippi State, Ohio State, and Pitt. Group B, Iowa, LSU, USC, Texas A&M. Group C with Clemson, Michigan, Notre Dame, and Oklahoma. And Group D with Alabama, Florida, Oregon, in Wisconsin. Yeah, they say that when they organize the groups for soccer in the Olympics, they try to keep them regionally diversified within the groups, and I've tried to do that here. So what we're going to do is go through each group, first with the teams that were eliminated from group play. First, with Group A. Mississippi State is basically the Dak Prescott and friends group. So look at this here. You got Dak Prescott here with basically no worthy skill players. A very solid. Look at that defensive line there. Preston Smith, Montez Sweat, Chris Jones, Jeffrey Simmons, Fletcher Cox. They're going to run in a 5-2. And pull Bernardrick McKinney out of retirement to even do that, though. And outside Darius Slay, not that much left in the defensive backfield here. So Mississippi State, despite some strong points, got eliminated. They're probably the first one to play against, though. I don't know, maybe not. Pitt. This one was actually tough to eliminate in group play. Gave Georgia and Ohio State a run here. Great quarterback depth with Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco in case Kenny Pickett just wasn't good in a given day. Solid running backs, James Conner and Izzy Abanikanda. Even if LaShawn McCoy's kind of retired, he'd probably be all right. Decent starting wide receivers, acceptable offensive line play, and just kind of gets weaker on the back end. You have Jordan Whitehead out there, but you got Aaron Donald, who probably isn't out of shape yet. I can't imagine he might ever be out of shape, to be honest. Kind of weak linebackers. Pitt wasn't able to move on. Group B eliminations. USC couldn't quite move on. So like I said, no Caleb Williams here. They had Sam Darnold at quarterback. Maybe the best wide receivers, or at least an argument for the best wide receivers in the tournament, with Amon-Ra St. Brown, Drake London, Michael Pittman, and Nelson Aguilar. But a surprisingly, in my opinion, surprisingly weak defense. Leonard Williams being by far the best on the defensive line, USC got eliminated. And Iowa, really close to moving on to the tournament. CJ Beathard isn't great, but he doesn't really need to be. Now, they don't have much of running back or really nothing at wide receiver, but their tight ends are by far the best group of tight ends. Arguably the three best tight ends in the entire tournament, all in Iowa. George Kittle, TJ Hockenson, and Sam Laporta. One of the top three, I'll say, offensive lines, too, in the whole tournament. Look at that. Tristan Wirfs, Tyler Linderbaum, Brandon Scherf. Riley Reif is on the bench here. On the defense, you got some strong points. AJ Epinesa, Lucas Van Ness for this tournament is fine. Jack Campbell, Amani Hooker, but just not enough there to really beat out some of these other stronger teams that we're going to come to in a minute. Group C eliminations. First, Notre Dame. Yeah, when Deshaun Kaiser is your quarterback, you're not making it very far. That's too bad too. Kyron Williams, a running back, is great. Tight end, they're actually very solid with Michael Mayer and Cole Kmet. But their wide receivers, Equanimeous St. Brown and Miles Boykin, probably your starters. Chase Claypool, he probably wouldn't care about this tournament very much. Great offensive line. Zach Martin, Ronnie Stanley, Mike McGlinchey, Quentin Nelson. Yeah, that actually, they're in the top 3 or 4 offensive lines in the whole tournament, too. Their defense isn't really balanced, though. They'd run a 3-3 dime defense where you got Kyle Hamilton, Harrison Smith, and Julian Love on the back end. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah in the middle. Jalen Smith, I guess, in the middle. Drew Tranquil, solid linebackers. Defensive line isn't what it used to be, though. At least they have some depth of NFL talent, but yeah, no, they got eliminated. And also eliminated, interestingly enough, was Michigan. So J.J. McCarthy not being eligible, they had to resort to Tom Brady at quarterback. Because let's be real, Tom Brady would beat out Chad Henne here. Surprisingly weak at certain points for Michigan. Running back, Chris Evans, that's all you got. Tight end, that's not great. Wide receivers, you don't have many, although Nico Collins and DPJ are pretty good. Offensive line, is fine. And you got some, again, solid players on defense, but it's not a very deep team. Aiden Hutchinson, Devin Bush, Jabril Peppers, that's pretty good, and just not enough. And Tom Brady, let's be real, Tom Brady's almost 50. You can only do this for so long. And now Group D's eliminations. Florida with a surprisingly solid team, in my opinion. So Anthony Richardson at quarterback is pretty good. Running back is fine. It's Dameon Pierce. Wide receivers, this is fine. Van Jefferson, DeMarcus Robinson, Kadarius Toney. Kyle Pitts is fine. They have a lot of safeties. The defensive backfield is a little bit strange. I got Keanu Neal, J.C. Jackson, C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Not that much up front for defense, though. So Florida got eliminated group play because they couldn't really stop anybody. And then Oregon, the Chip Kelly Oregon Olympic teams would have been a lot deeper here from a skill position standpoint. But after Justin Herbert, who's going to throw to here? We're kind of putting Jawan Johnson a wide receiver here instead of tight end because, that's kind of what he was at the time. Royce Freeman, the running back, and that's kind of it. Penei Sewell, excellent for offensive line, but technically, Max Unger was already kind of retired. On defense, you got Kayvon Thibodeau, Eric Armstead, DeForest Buckner, excellent defensive line, and then not much after that. So they're going to get thrown all over, and they don't have that much in the way of people for Justin Herbert to throw to, so they got eliminated. And now we're into the 8-team tournament. So who's still in it? Ohio State, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, LSU, Georgia, Alabama, and Clemson. In our first matchup, Wisconsin falls to Ohio State. Wisconsin with Russell Wilson at quarterback and solid running backs with Jonathan Taylor and Melvin Gordon. Doesn't have much for Russell Wilson to throw to, really weak at the wide receiver spot. Jake Ferguson's a good tight end, and this offensive line is incredible. Like, you got the starting center for the Jets is not even a starter for them. Joe Tip, and probably top 2 offensive line in the entire tournament for Wisconsin. But we all expected that from Wisconsin. And this would be true any Olympics for the last probably 25 years. The problem is defense. Is after TJ Watt and TJ Edwards and Andrew Van Ginkel, you don't really have that much. JJ Watt had to, pull him out of retirement to round out the roster here. So Wisconsin wasn't able to overcome Ohio State. Texas A&M wasn't able to get by Oklahoma. Ryan Tannehill is a solid quarterback for them. Texas A&M has solid wide receivers with Mike Evans, Christian Kirk, and Josh Reynolds. The running back spot is pretty good with Devin Achane and Travion Williams. Tight end, they had to go find Jay Sternberger wherever he is these days. And their offensive line isn't quite what it was in the Johnny Manziel era. Defensively, you got a great pass rush and Myles Garrett, Justin Matabuki, and they also got Vine Miller coming off the edge, but not much on the back end, so they weren't able to beat out Oklahoma, which is a pretty strong squad. You'll see in a little bit. Georgia got beat by LSU. Matthew Stafford's still the man for Georgia at quarterback here. Running back is obviously Georgia's strong point. We didn't need to rehabilitate Todd Gurley's knee for this tournament. Nick Chubb, DeAndre Swift, James Cook, that's good enough. Samir White barely even made the roster here. Wide receivers are kind of underwhelming for a team making it this far in the tournament with George Pickens and Mecole Hardman leading the way. I didn't recognize any of their tight ends. Their offensive line is good. David Andrews, Andrew Thomas, Isaiah Wynn, Ben Jones, that's pretty good. The defensive line also pretty good. Trayvon Walker, obviously. Jalen Carter. John Jakelin's in here. Linebackers, very solid. Leonard Floyd, Roquan Smith leading the defense here. Then you also got Nolan Smith and Nakobe Dean, Justin Houston. You got to put them on there. But defensive backs, that's probably where their weak point was and why they're able to be taken advantage of by LSU. So Georgia got knocked out. And in our last matchup, Clemson falls to Alabama. Trevor Lawrence is the man over Deshaun Watson here, probably the best quarterbacks to pick from of all the schools. Travis Etienne at running back. Solid wide receivers, even though DeAndre Hopkins isn't quite the guy he used to be. T. Higgins and Mike Williams in an injury-proof simulation is very good. So is Hunter Renfrow. Nothing to say there about tight ends, so they're going 4 wide every play. Surprisingly weak offensive line for a school like Clemson, though. Their defensive line is stacked. That's an absurd defensive line. Look at that. Grady Jarrett, Christian Wilkins, DJ Reader, and Dexter Lawrence. That's absurd. Their linebackers are just okay. Their defensive backs aren't amazing. AJ Terrell is good, but that's too much for Alabama to take advantage as well. So Clemson gets knocked out. Now on to the semifinals. 2 matchups left. First, we have Ohio State and Oklahoma. Oklahoma bites the dust here. Look at this offense for Oklahoma, though. Jalen Hurts chose to play for Oklahoma, getting the nod over Kyler Murray as a starter, and Baker Mayfield's there just for emotional support. Just kind of a rah-rah guy. They don't really need him. Look at the running backs. They got Joe Mixon, Ramondre Stevenson, Samaje Perine. Wide receivers actually probably could be a little better. CeeDee Lamb and Marquise Brown being great for starters, though. Tight end, you got Mark Andrews. And the offensive line, arguably the 2 best tackles in all of football, are the tackles for Oklahoma with Trent Williams and Lane Johnson. We had to bump Orlando Brown into guard, and then you got Creed Humphrey at center. That offensive line is probably the best you can get. The problem with Oklahoma is the defense. That's not good for a team at this level. Compared to the offense, we don't have that much here. So they got eliminated by Ohio State. And then now between LSU and Alabama, bit of a rivalry here, but LSU falls to the Crimson Tide. Joe Burrow at quarterback, obviously is very good. Running back, CEH is actually a little bit underwhelming at the running back spot. Wide receivers, though. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and Odell Beckham as the starters. Not to mention you have DJ Chark, Antos Marshall, and Kayshon Boutte. That's a great receiver core. Probably the best receiver core in the entire tournament. Offensive line is just okay, though. Lael Collins, Ethan Pacic is solid, but I was hoping for a little bit more on their offensive line. Defense, they got a lot of talent, though. Look at Daniil Hunter, Arden Key, Devin Godchaux, Al Wood, solid defensive line. Devin White and Patrick Queen at linebacker. And maybe the best secondary you can come up with here with Stingley, White, Matthew, Grant Delpit, and Jamal Adams. Patrick Peterson as the dime corner here. excellent defense. Not a lot of holes, just not quite enough to beat Alabama. In fact, LSU would beat out Oklahoma in the bronze medal game, which leaves us with Ohio State and Alabama playing for gold. Who's it going to be? It was close, but it's not Ohio State. Ohio State, though, look at this roster, though. C.J. Stroud at quarterback, running back, J.K. I mean, I guess that's a lot of injury risk at running back. Actually, you'd think Ohio State would be a little bit better there. Great wide receivers. Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Jackson Smith-Njigba. Maybe Michael Thomas would care enough to get in shape here. I don't know about him. Tight end's a bit weak. Ruckert and Van Etten. Farrell is a little bit light there. Offensive line could be a little better. Taylor Decker and Corey Linsley are great, but man, that offensive line could be stronger. Defensive line is amazing. Nick Bosa, Sam Hubbard, Joey Bosa, Cameron Hayward. Chase Young barely made the roster, although some people aren't going to be super surprised by that. Linebackers could be a little bit stronger. Defensive backs, though, if anything is up there with LSU, I think Ohio State is the best secondary in the tournament. Marshawn Lattimore, Denzel Ward, Eli Apple, Bradley Roby, and Jeff Okudah coming off the bench to play corner. Then you have Von Bell and Malik Hooker. An amazing team here, but they're not as good as Alabama, our gold medalists. So a quarterback, you got Tua, who's really established himself. There's no question he's the man here for the Alabama quarterbacks over Bryce Young and Mac Jones. Running backs, Jahmyr Gibbs, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, and Najee Harris. Alvin Kamara could, in theory, have decided to play for Alabama, but he wouldn't have made the team. The tight end might be the weakest point of this team, even though Irv Smith Jr. and O.J. Howard both drafted very highly. Wide receivers, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, Calvin Ridley. Amari Cooper isn't even a starting skill player here. Jerry Jeudy and Jamison Williams, also not starters. Defensive line, look at who we had to try and fit in here. I shouldn't have limited it to 8 defensive linemen. Sean Hand, Dalvin Tomlinson, A'Shawn Robinson, and Jaron Reed on the bench. Raekwon Davis didn't make the team. Jonathan Allen, Quinnen Williams, Deron Payne, and Christian Barmore. This is a lot of D tackles, but that's their defensive line. Good luck running through them. Linebackers, you got Will Anderson with C.J. Mosley, Rashaan Evans. This group actually probably would have been a little bit better about 12 years ago. But C.J. Mosley's still excellent to lead this defense. And then defensive backs. Marlon Humphrey, Trayvon Diggs, and Patrick Surtain as your corners. Eddie Jackson, Minkah Fitzpatrick at safety. They still got Brian Branch, Kareem Jackson, Xavier McKinney. I don't know what HaHa Clinton Dix is doing, but he wouldn't have made this team. But Alabama's your champion, so there you have it. You want to know who the gold medalists of the Alumni-Olympics would be? It's Alabama. Thanks for following along. If you think this tournament was interesting and would like to go back in time and see what would have happened 4 years ago, let me know in the comments. This is Byron Cobalt with another random-ass football video. Fantasy football season is coming up, so we want some interesting fantasy football content? Subscribe to Byron Cobalt's channel. That's me. That's my channel. Hope you enjoyed today's video. See you in the next one.